Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and I'm here because I'm trying to show you a new plugin that I've got. Maybe not the newest plugin to me, because it's working on something that I tried a long time ago, but this time I think I've really got it nailed. And it is, just find it there, called Noise. Now you can hear how this thing goes. It starts out with the decay turned all the way up, and we've just got a pretty much solid massive noise going on here. If you turn the high cutoff down, you can start getting a roll-off effect. This is one of our filters here. And it is also a filter that responds to the decay, because part of the purpose of this is to be able to overlay noise onto things like drums and whatever. As you can hear there. But the other purpose is for what you might call environmental effects. This you could use for something like Foley, because the way it's designed, these noise sources do a really good job of imitating natural environments. Like, we'll push this up here so that it's good and bright, and when we start fooling around with low cutoff and low shape, we're going to get different textures of sound here. The original plugin was called Voice of the Starship, which nobody knew what Voice of the Starship could possibly mean, so it didn't really go anywhere. But it meant something kind of like this. You could put on one of those sort of low rumbles and pretend like you were in Star Trek or something. Dial it in for whatever you were trying to do with it. Thing is, the high cutoff is a fairly normal filter type. It's an airwindows type, so it's not perfectly normal, but it's still essentially a normal filter type. Low cutoff and low shape are part of the noise generator itself. So when you start putting low cutoff up here, you're getting ambient type effects, but you can hear as I move them around a little bit, this is not just a regular random noise generation. You're hearing a sputtery sound like rain on a tin roof or something. And fooling with low shape, you can adjust that as well. It's a little hard to hear. Here. When I moved it over here, this little area give me a burst of lows. And assuming that that was what I was trying to get out of this, that would be where I'd leave that set. These are floating points so that you can move them around continuously, but they're feeding integer values. So there is a sharp break between two spots. Now here we've got that sort of distant rain effect. This control down at the bottom here, called distance, is another way of handling high frequency roll-offs. It's a moving average filter, which is not a normal digital filter. So what you get is kind of like this. I think in many ways that's a more natural sound. But as you can hear up top there, we're starting to get a sound coming out. It's not a perfect filter. It has unusual characteristics. And you could do this, for instance, supposing this was set to a plausible sound for being outside in the rain. Let's make it a heavier rain by changing the low cutoff. That's not heavier, that's lighter. That's a little heavier. And then suppose we're going to pretend as if we're going inside. We can use the distance and automate that. And that way it sounds almost like there's a sort of overhang. And this control can be automated to deal with the tonalities of the noise that you're generating. But wait, there's one more thing that you can do with this besides the low frequency rumble of having the low cutoff way over here, and the details of fussing with low shape. This is fairly unpredictable because it has to do with the nature of the noise generation algorithm. Let's get this a nice smooth sound. That works. We're going to cut the decay down because remember, we're doing this off of the sound. And one thing about that means that you can have a synthesizer or something driving your sound and use pressure or the level of the synthesizer that you're driving it with to control the high cutoff and get things like seashore sounds or bursts of wind or whatever. You can play this noise generation very effectively using this cutoff. It works out pretty well that way. But if we cut the decay way back, we're getting little bursts of sound. This is a very quick, the decay can become very quick when you crank it out. And it's run off of the dry wet, so we can blend dry with wet. Getting a more synthetic kind of sound there. Or we can fool around with this by getting more high frequencies out of it. That sounds more hissy right there. And we can enhance the drums that way. But there's one more thing. And I just had to update this plugin while I was making the video. I was like, oh my goodness, it didn't do this yet, so I put it in. Distance is under the dry wet because distance affects the dry signal as well. You'll want to have distance at 0 for getting a proper dry signal through it. But what this means is if you're doing your composite sound with your dry signal and your wet signal, you can use distance to tailor both at the same time. And that will blend them together to get a more natural kind of blend. That's really designed for more your Foley environmental type things of driving the generator with something that's going to produce you know, wind or rain-like effects or something like that, and then combining them with distance to affect also the source noise generator or synthesizer that you're using to maybe overlay additional components onto the noise generation. But you can also do it with just your like drum sounds like this, for instance. It's something of a warmer sound for your synthetic stuff there. And that way you can get interesting synthetic effects. Let me see if I can get a smooth, high frequency noise going. That's still a little crunchy. I'm sort of fishing for good sounding noise effects. I think I want it to be brighter, so low cutoff will have to go smaller. Yeah, that sounds good. And then fool with low shape a little bit to see whether I can dial it in just a bit more. I'm fooling around until the low frequency crackling, like the rain on a roof effect, goes away. There's usually going to be a certain amount of it, since this is not really like a straight up white noise generator. There's a lot of different color that happens, and it's not being imposed upon it by additional processing. It's coming directly out of the algorithm itself. Let's go with this one. And there's our drum effect. We'll maybe take distance down so that I get more brightness out of it. And then we're going to maximize the high cutoff so it acts more like an envelope filter. Slow down decay a little bit. Bring in a little bit of these drums. And then maybe hint at a bit of distance while we're at it. Now that's an interesting kind of sound that's not really anything like acoustic, but it's not all that much like electric either. My hope is that you can get some kind of use out of this funny little plugin. It is airwindows noise, as you can see here. And I made it just to use for myself, but sometimes those are the best ones. And think of it as a sort of little synthesizer that rides on top of other sounds and operates as an audio unit. airwindows noise is $50 like the rest of my plugins, and I hope you enjoy it.